Good evening, friends. I welcome you to this management development program, Strategies for Career Growth. I am privileged to have with me our chairman, CA Lalit Bajaj, our, I would say, very senior philosopher and guide. And I would also say, though she's senior, our friend also, CA Dr. Sangeeta Pandit. The speaker for today's session, Dr. Anitaji Madhok, coordinator, CA Madhav Kalani. Friends, this MDP program, I would say MDP, it's like, saying PAN number. So it's this MDP is a novel concept that we have brought about. And, it's something that as chartered accountants, we must all be very, very much eager, I would say, to listen and imbibe some of the things that would be discussed today and in the series, the remaining part also of the series. But before we start today, I would now request our chairman, CA Lalit Bajaj, to kindly give his opening remarks.
Thanks, Vishal Bhai. The guest faculty for the day, Dr. Anita Madhok, CA Dr. Sangeeta Pandit, who has been behind designing and planning this program, my colleague in the council, Vishal Bhai Doshi, coordinator Madhav Kalani, all the participants, seniors, friends, on behalf of WIRC, I welcome all of you. Friends, just to share with all of you that when we started this year, President's focus was always on developing skill sets of all our chartered accountants, brothers and sisters. And we have been keeping many seminars on technical aspects as far as in direct tax, indirect tax, auditing and assurance, all other activities are concerned. But we have a strong thought process that we have to sharpen and develop ourselves as far as soft skills is concerned, relationship management is concerned, managerial skills are concerned. So let me share with you that this is an initiative in developing the overall skill sets of all our members so that we can really function to the best of our capacity in providing services to all our clients. This management development program is first of its kind in this year, and let me tell you and assure you that we are seriously intending to continue with various modules of programs in the coming months. As in this program, we are really thankful to Jamnalal Bajaj Management Institute, wherein they have really helped us in bringing on board the best of the faculties from their institute. And Sydenham Institute, as Sangeeta Madam is from Sydenham organization, and she is actually involved in couple of other initiatives also, and this is one of the initiative where she is a speaker, and again she is part of the organization team in planning this program. So let me tell you, like Jamnalal Bajaj, we are trying to have a conversation with couple of other high graded institutes wherein we feel so that we will be really enriched by getting experience and know-how from all those experts from those institutes. So those will be announced shortly, and I would request all of you that please be with us in all the initiative which we are taking on these lines, because your presence, your participation, which will really motivate us and enable us to keep or organize all these programs which are not very core in our profession, but which are very relevant when we try to engage into all our activities. Two initiatives which I would like to share with today's participants is we are moving ahead with our research forum, wherein Vishal Bhai from Regional Council is really taking lead and ensuring that the research forum can really catapult into a real research activity. And Sangeeta Madam is really helping us in ensuring that all our members are really enriched by moving ahead in helping us in conducting the research activity. So we are moving ahead in that direction. Second, we have started with mentorship assistance program, wherein we are trying to enrich our younger members and members who are looking for newer areas of profession, to really mentor themselves on those aspects, so that they can really grow and enter into a newer sphere wherein they can really develop themselves in a thorough professional. So these were the two initiatives. With this, I once again welcome all of you, and I look forward for more and more participation and more contribution from all of you in all the initiatives at WIRC. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Lalit bhai. I would now request Sangeeta ma'am to kindly address the audience.
Hello, everybody. Very good evening to everyone. Actually, our current chairman, CA Lalit Bajaj, is focused on being very innovative, being very creative in delivering his value addition sessions to the members. So when I was invited by him to ideate some sessions, I was just wondering what can we do in a very different way. And at that time only Vishal Bhai called me and made me part of the research committee. And there, delving deeper and speaking to chartered accountants, I came to the conclusion that there are so many chartered accountants who have been very, very successful in life. And there are so many who could not reach there, though they had the same potential, the same opportunities. And then when we delved deeper, we thought one of the things which was obstructing them is communication skills and strategies on how to navigate their career. So then we ideated about this, and Anita is a very close friend of mine. And in 2 hours, you will understand what she would like to explain to you. There are so many issues which sort of we create obstacles for ourselves, which once we realize what they are, we can reach our potential. And all of us have passed the final CA exam, which is one of the toughest. So all of us have the potential, but somewhere something is lacking, that we are not as successful as some of the other chartered accountants are. We have many chartered accountants who are CEOs of MNCs. We have chartered accountants who have started their individual practice and created a big name for themselves, who have become partners in the reputed CA firms at a very young age. So what is it that they have and others don't have? And all of us, it is possible for everybody to reach that level. So Anita, now the floor is yours. I think you've got the background about chartered accountants, so I'm sure this 2 hours would be a great value addition. And knowing you, I know that it would indeed be a value addition to the listeners. Thank you, Lalit bhai. Thank you, Vishal bhai.
Thank you, Sangeeta ma'am. I would now request our coordinator, CA Madhav Kalani, to kindly introduce our expert speaker, Anita ma'am.
Yeah, good evening, everyone, and indeed a great pleasure to be coordinating this event. And welcome, Anita ma'am, to this forum. And I think your suggestions and your inputs really help the fraternity in looking at the value addition points, which I think Lalit sir has envisaged. And this is indeed a great opportunity for everyone to interact with you. So Anita ma'am is the managing director of Open Spaces Consulting in Mumbai. It's a global professional HR system expert. She's a creative thinker and writer, and much sought after speaker, and an academician of a repute. So she's also a behavioral scientist and experienced trainer. Dr. Madhok qualified with an honors degree in psychology from Delhi University and MBA in HRD from XLRI Jamshedpur. Also, it was followed by a PhD in managerial leadership from Punjab University in Chandigarh, India. Her corporate career in India spanned over 12 years with DCM Group's SRF Limited and FMCG major Marico Industries. Looking at all this, I definitely am of the view that we are going to have a very enriching session, because this is something very different and out of the box, which we all professionals can actually discuss and see. So welcome, Anita ma'am, and the floor is to you to give inputs on your thoughts and how do we be that creative person in our profession. So Over to you, ma'am. Yeah.
Thank you, CA Madhavji. Very nice of you to introduce me. And a very warm thanks to CA Lalit Bajaj, Chairman, and CA Vishal Doshi, Vice Chairman. And of course, my dear friend CA Sangeeta Pandit. She's been a very strong backbone to the development of the ideas on this program. And it's because of her that we are here, all of us gathered here today. One of the things that Dr. Sangeeta said was very strongly resonating with me. And that is, all chartered accountants are very super intelligent people. I mean, you have to be intelligent if you want to pass the CA exam. It's one of the toughest exams, and we all know how hard students prepare for it. So all those who are chartered accountants, my congratulations to you. You're already very intelligent. So what is intelligence? Intelligence is the ability to think rationally, to think logically, to think unemotionally, and to think, cause and effect and sequential. And so they're very good skills to have intelligence when it comes to doing audits or to doing, financial statements and to all the wonderful things that chartered accountants do. It's a very good skill to have, is intelligence. And that you already have because you're already chartered accountants. But Sangeeta ji also said that some CAs are successful and some CAs are not so successful. Some have risen the ladder very fast and some have not risen the ladder so fast. All are equally intelligent, all are equally potentially great. The difference here, my dear friends, is emotional intelligence. It's emotional intelligence that makes all the difference. So today's
Neeta ma'am,
yes,
आपका PPT है आपका?
हाँ, PPT है. I'm going to share that.
So my screen कर दीजिए ना.
Okay, I'll just share.
हाँ, आ गया. अभी आपका PPT ऑन कर दीजिए मैम. Full slide में.
Yes.
Okay.
So the point I was making is that the difference between those who succeed and those who don't succeed sometimes the secret lies in the way you manage your relationships. Two equally intelligent chartered accountants will conduct a similar audit more or less when it comes to doing an audit of a client. But one will be more easily received because he managed his relationships better and he was able to deal with the conflicts that may have arisen in a more logical way, in a more emotionally intelligent way. And because one person has better emotional intelligence, he generally succeeds more than another who didn't have. So I'm not saying that you can substitute emotional intelligence for normal intelligence, for general intelligence. No, everyone has to be intelligent, but the one with more emotional intelligence sometimes gets forward much faster. So friends, welcome to this program, Strategies for Career Growth, Winning It with Emotional Intelligence. Today's day is with me, and we are going to take you down a little bit of a journey from now onwards till about 8 p.m. I will like to structure my time in such a way, it is right now 6:15 or thereabouts. I will stop at about 7:45 this presentation, and any questions and answers, questions can be put in the question box. I will make sure I will address as many questions as possible. Okay, thank you so much for your attention, everybody. Okay, in 2016, Klaus Schwab, who is the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, and it's a place, the World Economic Forum, everybody knows, they meet in Davos every year, is the place where a lot of economic policies are figured out and are thrashed out. A lot of heads of state attend, a lot of industry leaders attend this forum. And the founder and executive chairman is Klaus Schwab. And in 2006, he published a book called Industry 4.0. This is to say that we are at the beginning of a revolution that is fundamentally changing the way we live, work, and relate to each other. Now, when he spoke of Industry 4.0, what did he mean? And I think you can see my panel also over here, or you can only see my screen. Okay, I will continue. So Industry 4.0, Industry 4.0 is about how the world is going to be in the future with technology advancement and with the way artificial intelligence and cyber revolutions are coming in. According to Klaus Schwab, the first industrial revolution was when things got mechanized. There were machines that came in, you know, for example, if you're talking about textiles, there were textiles which were made by hand in looms which were driven by hand, and there was no power, there was no electricity that was used. So the first industrial revolution happened when mechanizing came in, steam, water power, electricity came in, machines were invented. The second industrial revolution happened when there was mass production, assembly line, batch production. There was proper electricity and good power generation. The third industrial revolution happened sometime in the 70s and 80s when computers and automation started coming in. And today we say that although computers are definitely here and a big ubiquitous part of our life, they don't go away. Everywhere you wake up in the morning, you look at your mobile phone to see what's the time and what you have for the day. You enter your house and you ask Google, hello Google, how is things? So the fourth industrial revolution is about all the lifestyle changes that will get made as a result of cyber systems, networks, artificial intelligence, and all of that. So the future of work is what it's about. Today we are in COVID times and everyone is talking about the new normal and how things have changed forever. But if you ask me, in the COVID times, we have accelerated our approach to Industry 4.0. We have seen this particular session could have been a face-to-face session in an auditorium or in a classroom or a training room somewhere, but today is being delivered on the technology. And that's because of COVID, no other reason. And today COVID is here to, whether COVID goes away, the pandemic may come to an end, but the changes that it has brought to our way we work are here to stay. Those are not going to go back. So at a physical level, we're already seeing today, in many countries, autonomous vehicles. These are driverless cars. And you just get into the taxi or into a train and there's no driver there. It's just a computer that's driving the train. It's just a computer that's driving the car. And they're autonomously driven. Of course, in India, we are still a little far away from that, but there are many countries where many cars, such cars and vehicles do exist. We are looking at 3D printing. So today, if you have a heart valve that needs to be replaced, you don't look around for somebody who will donate you a heart valve, nor will you go to a factory or a plant or a manufacturing facility to make a heart valve. You will get a 3D printed heart valve made out of special materials which are very similar to the human tissue, and that is ready for transplanting into your heart, which is custom made, exactly the same size and dimensions that your heart is. So 3D printing is also here to stay. Advanced robotics. Today is the most sought after are the robots. Everyone, especially post-COVID, a lot of people have bought robots to clean their houses and dishwashers, which are driven by technology to clean their dishes because these skills became suddenly very much in demand. So new normal is here to stay and it's only accelerated Industry 4.0. At a digital level, there is the Internet of Things. You know how Internet is changing every day, not just our access to information and large sums of information, but also our access to, through social media, our access to human beings, to huge populations, to huge vast target audiences. It's also influencing the, the way we communicate. It's also influencing the way we analyze data. So it's not just information, but the analytics of data is also changed completely. It's brought in things like blockchain technology, which encrypts everything that you do in a time frame, and that creates a record of a certain kind. It's also brought in bitcoins, which are currencies. Of course, the lockdown currently has put a slight halt to the usage of bitcoins. But my guess is that in 2021 and 2022, when the lockdown is over, bitcoins will become exceedingly more popular as forms of currency. Today, when I go to the market and I have to buy some medicines, yesterday I was at the chemist, I was giving him some 500 rupee note, and he was returning some notes to me, and I felt that, you know, I should sanitize my hand because the notes have exchanged so many hands during the day, and I don't know what virus may be on the note. So if there is a Bitcoin kind of currency where even a credit card is not to be exchanged, a contactless kind of transaction, and different kind of platforms. Tomorrow onwards, I'm going to spend 3 days in a conference, and it's entirely being driven in a 3D format. So there's a business school I'm visiting, which is based in Portugal. I will be entering the business school. I will be registering at reception. I'll be attending sessions. I'll be meeting other people. I will have to create a little avatar for myself. And my avatar will do all of these things, including going down to the beach, including going for a walk, and including dancing, including question answers, everything that you would do in a conference. And it's possible because of a certain 3D platform that got created for us for this event. At the biological level, you will find a lot of genome science is going to reveal. In fact, the genome science is already trying to decode the DNA of this COVID virus and trying to create vaccines for it. The genome science will also try and decode our DNA to see what makes us more strong and more immune to this virus. The genome sciences will try to manipulate certain genomes in certain molecules in certain crops, and you'll have genetically modified crops, and you'll have genetically modified, which will be far more, economically viable. The synthetic biology, where you're growing crops in a hydroponic manner. You don't need soil or space to grow crops. You can grow it in a tray inside a glass house. The neurosciences is helping us understand how the brain really works. So everything about your soft skills can be programmed into your brain technically. Theoretically, it can be, and it is being proven to do that. And if anyone wants another lecture on neuroscience, there's a whole lot of few hours sessions that we can take. And there's a lot more data today available. So last week I had some blood tests done, and for the first time my my patho lab came back and gave me my last 5 years data on what my hemoglobin trends have been, what my lipid profile has been. So everyone is now aggregating data. Today, an artificial intelligence can diagnose things like precancerous conditions or COVID susceptibility or immunity much better than a doctor can, because the artificial intelligence has access to a whole lot more information and data about you than a doctor could ever process in his human brain. So there is a lot of changes, and this is all impacting the future of work. This is impacting our economy in terms of what kind of growth, what kind of new skills are required, what kind of employment, what nature of work we do. We are not going to be hired for gathering data anymore, but we will be definitely hired for being able to process and understand how to process that data. We will not be hired for processing that data anymore, but we will be hired for how do we interpret and analyze and create strategies out of that data. So whatever were the hard skills, whatever were the soft skills of today, whatever you call soft skills, most of them are going to be converted into hard skills tomorrow, because the computer will be able to do a lot of the work for you. So the nature of work has changed, the nature of jobs has changed. At a national level, you will find countries and cities competing for investments, conference and events, human talents and entrepreneurs. You will find business has changed. You'll find social media has changed. and people are no longer going to go out and party the way they used to party. Everyone is going to sit at home and party on Zoom, and the social impact of that has become, people have become more and more me-centered. At an individual level, fundamental things have to change. What we do, how we think and react, and how we work and learn has to change. Because if we continue to do what we always did, we will continue to get what we always got, and that's no longer relevant. How we think and react has to change today. What is the processing that goes on in my mind? What are the consequences? What are the impact? What is the thinking? What's the output? All that has to change. And how we conduct our work and learn, including how we dress and how we carry ourselves, what are good manners, what are bad manners. All those definitions are going to change, and it's so important. We are going towards an era where we need leaders who are emotionally charged, able to champion cooperative working, and they will coach rather than command, and they will be driven by empathy, not ego. The digital revolution needs a different, more human kind of leadership. And that's the positive thing, because now more than ever, leadership needs to be more human, more emotionally intelligent than ever before. Nature of change. I have a little cartoon here for you. Change is here to stay. What do you do? Which side of the fence do you sit on? So there's a Dilbert over here, and his boss is asking, did you make the changes I asked for? So he says, it depends. Do you remember what you asked me to change? He says, no. Then he says, yes, I made the change. But then there are two sides of the fence. Either you can resist the change and say, hey, listen, we are going to go back to the way things used to be before COVID, and it's going to go back. Nothing is going to change. It's just a temporary blip on the horizon. Or some people will say, hey, listen, a lot's going to change. Let's adapt to that right now, here and now. So which side of the fence do you want to sit on? Do you want to be the ones who will resist and say, hey, let's continue doing things the way we did? Or are you going to adapt to the situation and take it on and move the next level and do things in a fundamentally different way? Okay, we now move to what is emotional intelligence. I'm going to skip a couple of slides here. So what is emotional intelligence? It's defined as the capacity to be aware of, to control and express one's emotions, and to handle interpersonal relationships judiciously and empathetically. Emotional intelligence is the key to both personal and professional success. So look at the cartoon on the right-hand side. It says you are not being replaced by a robot, but you are definitely being replaced by someone who understands that robot and understands how to manage that robot. So let's understand a little bit more. Emotional intelligence is responsible for 58% of your performance. 90% of top performers have high EQ. EQ is what? Emotional quotient. It's just a way of saying intelligence quotient, and there's emotional quotient. It's a measure of emotional intelligence. And there are many ways to measure emotional intelligence, including something I will introduce to you right now. 65% managers say that they could do their job more effectively if they found ways to move more easily managed distressed workers, if they could manage distressed workers more easily. So because of COVID times, people working from home, the stress levels are a lot higher. And if they find ways to deal with the stress level, it can help much more. So the other day I was talking to one HR manager. I was saying, how have you changed some of the HR practices in your organization? He says earlier, you know, whenever an employee had a birthday, in his department, we would get a cake and we would, you know, cut a cake and everyone would celebrate the birthday. And, you know, everyone would say something nice about the birthday person, whether it was a boy or a girl. And he says one of the things we do now is one of the things that we do now is that we do the birthday parties on the Zoom or on WebEx or on GoToWebinar like this platform is. We manage birthday parties on the Zoom on the internet. So I said, okay, so you have a cake? He says, yes, what we do is we send a cake to the employee's residence and we ask him to bring it out and we invite the family members. All the family members are also present for his birthday. And we sing a song, we say speeches, and other people attend on the Zoom conference. And we all enjoy a birthday party. The difference is that now the family members are also involved. And it's not just restricted to just the employee and his colleagues. So can you see how much more human that birthday party can be actually, despite the fact that it's being done on the internet. 75% of Fortune 500 firms use emotional intelligence training. I think that's a very powerful statistic. To be in the Fortune 500 firms, you'll find many successful firms use this kind of training that we are doing here as well. How do you know what's your emotional quotient? Well, you can take a look in the mirror and you can say, hey, listen, am I doing a good job? Am I not doing a good job? So looking in the mirror is sometimes deceptive because we are tending to think about ourselves with reference only to ourselves. We don't have any external anchor to refer to us. So reflection, introspection is definitely a good way, but there is a test of emotional intelligence there are many tests that can be taken. Oops. I'm sorry. It's not staying. That was an important slide. For some reason, it's not sticking, that slide. So I will show it from here because it's an important slide for everybody. So I don't know if you have received it or not, but earlier this morning, I had sent a small little handout for distribution amongst all of you who are attending. And I can see a large number of attendees, almost 50 attendees are there present in the column, I can tell. And if you have received my handout, you will find my handout looks something like this, which I made. It looks like this. Can you see this? I'm sure you can see it. Okay, so it's a letter which I have written to you, all participants of this program. And the fact that success in life is not an accident, but it's the result of your choices, your attitude, and your mastery over your actions and thoughts. So it's about introducing myself, and it's about the session, this letter I have written to you. And this is also, I have given you a small little questionnaire. If you have already taken the questionnaire, well and good. If not, after this program, you will get to receive my handout. It will be available on the website for a download. And you can download this document and you can take an assessment, which is like a questionnaire where you simply have to answer certain questions. So there are so many questions about something called emotional awareness. And you can say, I am totally unemotional at all times, or you can say, my feelings are always clear to me. And if you're at 0, then you say, I'm unemotional. If you're at 4, you circle 4, and you say, my feelings are clear. If you're somewhere in between, you can choose any option that you like from here, depending upon what your response is. So the sum total of all the circles here will give you the total score on emotional awareness over here. Similarly, there are questions on emotional management, social emotional awareness, relationship management. And then there is a scoring key that will tell you how much you have scored. So I'm closing this now. Once you have taken this questionnaire, what I'll ask you to do is to assess yourself and assess what your emotional intelligence is all about. So there's 4 dimensions here: emotional awareness, emotional management, social emotional awareness, and relationship management. And if you have scored 0 to 24, that means this is an area where you need to enrich yourself more and you require some attention and development. If you have rated yourself between 25 to 34, it means that you are functioning quite effectively. You can consider what are your strengths. If your emotional awareness is your strength, self-awareness is your strength, then consider strengthening that. If your social emotional awareness you've scored a little low, then consider your area for enrichment is this one. But if you have scored 35 to 40, then you have very good skills, and then you use your best skills to leverage and develop weaker areas. So friends, I hope you have understood how to use this tool that I wanted to share with you. And I hope you will be able to download this handout, and I hope you'll be able to answer this question. So how to apply emotional intelligence? How do we apply some of all this? There is some application. Without application, all knowledge is wasted. So knowing your emotional quotient score is good, but without application, what is the use? So what I have done is I've tried to look at some typical situations that you will find yourself in. Many of you will be employed in organizations. Many of you might be independently practicing, or many of you might be practicing in a small chartered accounting firm. And depending upon what your situation is, you can say at work, it's either boss relationships, or you can say client relationships also, because if you're an independent practice, then the client is the boss, isn't it? So work or boss relationships. So find out what your boss expects from you, first of all. And this is the difference between very good chartered accountants and great chartered accountants. The ones who are great and successful, they try to find out what is it that the client needs from you. They do not say, hey, listen, I have this big body of knowledge and I have the knowledge of all the processes and the tax and the refunds and the way it works and the financial regulations. And here I am, you can use this from me. No, that's not the way to go. In management, we always say be customer centric, and the boss or the client is the customer. So all chartered accountants need to learn to hear, and this is where your social emotional intelligence comes in, to understand what is it the boss expects from you and try and empathize. Now there's a word called empathize, which means you put yourself in the boss's shoes, you put yourself in the client's shoes and understand what is the pressure that they are working under. What is their personal life about? What is the context in which they're operating? What is the deliverables that they have in their organizations? So once you empathize with your boss or your client or your stakeholders, you will find that your entire body of knowledge, it will come to the rescue in meeting your boss's expectations. So it's great to be a great chartered accountant, but unless you are relevant to your boss or your client, it is not going to reap any long-term dividends for you. So just remember these things, that if bosses play favorites, which they do, every boss has a favorite, and there's nothing wrong with that, because some employees deliver better than others. And in same with the clients, they are aware that lots of chartered accountants in the market, And sometimes the chartered accountants, they prefer one chartered accountant over another, because one chartered accountant delivers to them what they want and how they want it, without compromising on the financial regulations, etc. But even clients have their favorites. And if bosses play favorites, if you are one of them, great, wonderful. But if you're not one of them, be strategic as to how you play back. Everybody doesn't have to be on an equal platform all the time. It never works that way. Know when it is time to part ways with a boss that holds you back. If a client becomes too constraining and demands too much of bending from your side, or a boss demands you to compromise too much, then you know when it is time to resign and say, okay, I cannot. If you're considering a new job or a new client, first you must think about the kind of clients you would like to have and then look out for them. Consider the kind of boss you would like to have and look out for them. And it's true of life, you know. I mean, we'll
Anita, I think we've lost you. I think we can't hear you.
मैम नेटवर्क शायद लॉस हुआ है शायद से। हाँ अभी है।
I can see
बोलिए अनीता मैम
something
बोलिए।
here. Am I audible? Yes, I think. Yes, please. Yes, you know, has competitors. Even if you're a solo chartered accountant working alone, you know, you're working in independent practice, your peers are people whom you network with and people whom you collaborate with for delivering, you know, client engagements. And there's always a peer group. There's always people who are your equals and whom you have to manage those relationships with, and you have to. So the first thing is, with regard to your peer group, is to look in the mirror. Look in the mirror. When I say look in the mirror, I don't mean just actually get a mirror and look in it. What I mean is reflect. Reflect upon how your day is gone. Reflect upon that relationship with the other person. Reflect on who the other person is. Try and understand what his context is, his or her context is. Try and understand what he or she wants out of life. So reflect. When I look in the mirror, I mean reflect. Learn to reserve judgment. Stop thinking this is good about him, or this is bad about him, or this is excellent about him, or these are his flaws. I learned the other day that if you're, you know, inside your brain, there is neurosciences. If you're inside your brain, it takes almost 7 or 8 calories to generate a positive thought, an optimistic thought. And it takes only 1 or 2 calories to generate a negative thought. So when we are passing judgment, it's usually negative. It's easier to do that. It's the easiest to pass negative judgment. It's the easiest to find fault. It's the easiest to say something is wrong with this person and identify what is wrong with them. So when I'm saying learn to reserve judgment, what I really mean is that learn to try and assess the situation as it is, without saying what is good or bad. As it is, what is the context? What is the intention? What is the purpose? What is going on here? It's not about something being good or bad. It's not about something being right or wrong. It's not about something being, black or white. It's about things being as they are. So when you learn, this is something which does not come naturally to everybody. It's very easy to pass judgment. That's the first response because it takes less calories. It's the easiest way is to suddenly dismiss a person and say this person is of no use, or to dismiss a fact and say this fact is of no use, or to say this is not right, or to say this is wrong. But when you reserve judgment, you say, okay, this is what is happening here, and this is what context it is in, and these are the people associated with, these are their expectations, these are their contexts, these are their personalities. Okay, now let us say, what opinion do we have, good or bad, about this? So unless you reserve the judgment, unless you reserve your judgment, any opinion, any reaction that you give will be premature and will be definitely destructive. So the first reaction is always destructive. A proactive approach needs some consideration, some time to reflect and think. Never insult people in public. Allow your peers to save face. If someone is saying something to save his face and to cover his backside and to, avoid being humiliated or avoid saying something that he's ashamed of, so allow that to happen because that's only human, especially if it's in a public situation. You don't need to cut people in public and tell them something is wrong with them. You don't have to be the loudest person in the room. You don't have to be the one who speaks the most in the room. You don't have to be the most best dressed in the room. You don't have to be the biggest egoistic person in the room. You don't have to always win. It was only Donald Trump. For him, he never lost in his life. And when he lost, how badly he lost. So don't strive to always win. It's okay to take a little setback now and then. It's the bigger picture, it's the larger journey. It's okay to divert from reality for a few minutes and for a little bit. Avoid full face-off situations, direct confrontations, complete debates, and avoid debating. Find ways to discuss rather than debate. Find ways to reciprocate. If someone has paid you a compliment, find a way to pay it back. If someone has done you a favor, find a way to, if someone has saved your face, find a way to save his face next time. Appreciate others because everybody has a lot of good in them and everyone has a need to be appreciated. Avoid gossip. So many times, you go to a canteen, in any canteen, and you'll find people are talking ill about the organization, or they're talking ill about their bosses, or they're cribbing about what happened today, and they're generally venting out a lot of frustration. But tell me, anybody wins in that? Does the organization win? No. Do you win? No. Does the listener win? No. Does the person who's venting out or gossiping, do they win? No. Nobody wins. Everybody loses. So why gossip to me, according to me, gossip is a lose-lose situation. Everybody loses, nobody wins. And manage your boundaries. A most effective manager and a chartered accountant is one who knows when to say, what to say, and when not to say, when to keep quiet, when to act and when to withhold action. To manage those boundaries in a peer group, it's very important. You don't have to say everything and blurt out whatever is in your head. There needs to be some filters in your mind which need to be in place. Subordinate team members. So if I'm a boss, if I have a chartered accountant, I have some article clerks working under me, or if I'm a boss and I have other CAs working for me or other non-CAs also working for me, it's a different ball game. You are not just a leader, you are a team leader. You're not just a player, you're the captain of the team. And good players not necessarily make good captains. If they do, it's a wonderful bonus, but generally it's not true. So for example, in our cricket team, you see Sachin Tendulkar was one of the greatest players the world has ever seen. What a genius. But when he was offered the captaincy, He tried it and then he refused. He says, I'm sorry, I'd rather be a good player. I don't want to have the headache of managing the team, and I'm not capable of being a team leader. So team leadership, if you want to be a team leader, team leadership skills are skills that can be learned, and emotional intelligence helps you learn these skills. And this program is part of the ways of learning what team leadership is also about. So remember one thing, employee trust must be earned. If you walk into a room full of article clerks who are going to be reporting to you from now on, they're all sitting in their seats and wondering, okay, this person is the boss. I don't know whether I'm going to like him. I'm not going to like him. I don't know whether I'm going to trust him. I'm not going to trust him. I don't know whether I can work with him or I can't work with him or her. Employee trust needs to be earned. It's not going to come straight. So when you walk into a room, expect people to be open to being trusting, but don't expect trust 100% to start with. So offer your trust first and say, look, I trust you. I know you guys are going to do a great job. And okay, if somebody does not meet your trust, then fine, you have a reason to not trust that person. I'm not asking you to blindly trust anybody, but your trust of others has to come first. And then it has to stand the test of time. Tell them your name, not your title. This is who I am. You don't have to brag about your position. Ultimately, you earn the trust, not your title. Title will earn respect, but then if you don't have the title tomorrow, then you won't achieve anything. Ask your team members what is more important. Listen effectively. Listen to them. Ask them. Let them speak first. Be as open and transparent in your communication as possible. So when I say save surprises for birthdays, that's what I mean. Be as open as possible and be as transparent as possible. Don't have any hidden agendas. Don't have any surprises waiting around the corner, something that you say, I was just testing you and I was waiting to see if you're going to measure up or not. Say it up front. Whatever has to be said needs to be said up front, because people do not trust somebody who manipulates situations. You may move ahead that way, but you do not get respect and trust. You only get respect as much as you give. You only get as much respect as you give. This, I'm sure, everywhere in life, this works not only in team members, but this works with your parents. If you give parents your respect, they respect you. If you give your spouse your spouse respects you. So be respectful. There's nothing wrong with giving respect to people. It does not diminish you in any way. It doesn't make you any lesser. It doesn't make you any smaller in any way. Show them that you're not afraid of failure. All teams have success and failure. Sometimes we win, sometimes we lose, but in the overall, we might win some, we might lose some, but we're not afraid of it. We can learn from failures. Because nobody likes to have a boss who is afraid of failure. Because this boss is then very edgy and very highly strung and cannot handle any setbacks and cannot handle any imperfections. So if you say we are not afraid of failure, it's okay if you fail once in a while, as long as you learn from that failure and try not to repeat it, the same mistake. Yes, if a person keeps repeating the same mistake and falling flat every time, then there is something wrong with that person. But you have to show people that to fail is okay, as long as you don't make excuses for that failure, and as long as you learn from that failure, it's fine. Lead with integrity. If you don't have integrity, you can't expect it from your team players also. It's very simple. Whatever you do, others do as well. You have to lead by example. People follow your actions, not your words. This is very important. People follow your actions, not your words. So if you have integrity, they will follow your integrity. But if you don't have integrity and you keep talking that we want to be integrity, I have a lot of integrity, but actions don't say it, then people will look and assess you with your actions, not with your words. Let people manage the tasks. You don't have to do everything yourself. You don't have to dot every I and cross every T. We always say that sometimes chartered accountants are like what we call red pencil. You go with a red pencil and you manage, make sure all the decimal points are aligned and make sure. In management, we say we don't micromanage. We always keep the bigger picture in mind. We provide the direction and let others do the task because it's their job to do the task. The difference between a manager and a doer is a manager manages. And what is the definition of management? If you go to any management textbook, the very first page, you'll find there are many definitions of management, but by and large, management means it's the art and science of getting things done, not doing them. It's the art and science of getting things done through men, money, machines, materials, markets, and all those M's and P's that you might learn about in a business education program. So let them manage tasks. You are the manager. You're the team leader. You're there to motivate them, support them, give them the direction, give them the training. If they fail, yes, you can give them direction and tell them how it's done, but you don't have to do it yourself. Build up and support others in rough times. So when the things get rough, like for example, COVID struck all of a sudden, and no time, or something like DMAT happened suddenly with no warning. Tax changes happened suddenly without any warning. Right. So sometimes there is rough weather. It's 30th of September and you have not finished your submissions, you have not filed your returns, you have not completed all the paperwork. The times are rough. So you need to be there to support people. You need to be there to say shabash. You need to be there to pick them up when they fall. You need to be there to manage their stress when they want to vent out. And one thing is there, you're never having all the answers yourself. Don't pretend you know it all. Even if you do, you may be the cat's wizard when it comes to direct taxation. Or you may be the best person in the world as far as derivatives is concerned. But even if you do have all the answers, let other people have the space. When you walk into a room, the most popular person is the person who listens to others and allows them to have the space and makes them feel important. So as a team leader, even if you have the knowledge and the answers, and everyone can see that, you don't have to answer everything all the time. People can see that you have the knowledge, but allow others to share their part and their points of view as well. Those of you who work in organizations will face something called appraisal time. Big organizations like Deloitte and so many others, they hire large amounts of chartered accountants. So if you work in organizations, you will know that once in a year or there is a self-review that happens and there is a organization performance review that happens. Ask yourself, there are three kinds of performers generally. Three kinds of performers: underperformers, average performers, and overperformers. If you are the assessor, if you are the boss and you have a team under you, you need to manage all three kinds. How will you manage underperformers? You need to detach and put aside your feelings at this stage. You need to not get too emotional in your management of that assessment. Otherwise we say, "Arey, he's an underperformer, but he'll feel bad, no? So let me give him a good rating." I can do a full 5-day program on appraisals and how to evaluate and assess underperformers, average performers, and overperformers. Average performers, you need to be patient about them. You need to find ways in which to develop them and train them so that they become excellent performers. Average performers are the backbone of any organization. Not everyone is excellent. In any company, any organization, any business, any setup, the average performers are 75% of your population. They're just average, they're everyday people. They come to work, they do a reasonably good job and they go back. They are the backbone of the organization. So don't say that this person is just an average performer and dismiss him. He's a vital contributor to the business bottom line. Average performers make the wheels of the organization run. I had once a CEO whom I was coaching, and the CEO told me, Anita, you know, I would be very happy if I had an organization full of average performers. All I have to do is to give them good goals, not very exceptional goals, give them average goals. And I know that they will achieve those average goals. And I know at the end of the year, I will do well in the organization. Everybody will achieve their goals and do well, and all my goals will be achieved, and the organization will go places. Sometimes good leaders know how to get a mediocre team to perform in excellent ways. I have seen that happen with my eyes, with my own observation, and with my own experience. A team of average performers can produce excellent results, outstanding results. So put aside all your beliefs. This person is average. He's nothing great. Push those aside. It's not true. If he's average, he's an asset of the best kind. And be patient about results. Things take time. Rome was not built in a day. Organizations were not built in a day. It takes time to build everything. If you have a person who's an overperformer or exceptional performer, you need to praise them, not flatter them. I can say, okay, you know, I love the way you have submitted that project report. That project report was superb. It was excellent because it had everything in place. There was no errors. It was well formatted. It drove home the message properly. You can describe and you can praise everything about that project report and about the person. And the person will feel, yes, I know I did a good job and everyone's appreciating what a good job I did. And I know what more I need to do. It builds confidence when you praise a person. It builds the confidence. But when you tell a person, when you flatter a person, even if you flatter an average performer, no one takes you seriously. And what is flattery? When you say, hey, you are superb, you are fantastic, you are wonderful, you are the top employee, and you are a fabulous person, and you don't know what you're really, flattering him for. People use flattery to manipulate others. So when you're flattering a person, you're only building an ego. You're not reinforcing the right behavior. The person thinks, oh, I'm the greatest person, and no one can now question me. So he doesn't know what he needs to do more of. He doesn't know where he needs to improve. He doesn't know anything about what really he's good at. So don't flatter a person, but definitely praise. And there is a lot of difference between what is praise and what is flattery. Overperformers are sometimes mavericks. They are maverick characters. They are the first to leave because they cannot play the game in an organization that needs to be played. They're always on the periphery of the group dynamics. In a team, they will never be in the center playing with the rest of the team. They will be on the outside doing their own maverick, independent thinking, and they are normally not team players, overperformers. Normally not team players. So if you're managing overperformers and they need to move, you can let them go. You can run the organization on great teamwork with an average set of employees as well. So overperformers rarely stay. And if they stay, that's wonderful. Emotional intelligence in work-life balance. There are lots of tips that are coming your way, lots of do's and don'ts that are coming your way. And here are some more lessons. And the first is, at this stage, I want to stop and request everybody, all of you participants, please start putting your questions in the question box. Please start putting all your questions in the question box. Now, I'm sure there's lots of churning in your mind and you have plenty of things to say, lots of questions to ask. Put it now and we'll come back to your questions very soon. I need to see the questions. I'm looking at the question box right now. Please put your questions in the question box right now. I hope everyone can see the question box. So work and life, this is part of what I call this is part of what I call my Live Life and Love Work series. Because, while we are all professionals and we are all good professionals, we are committed to our work, but there's always a balance. All work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. So we always talk about work-life balance. And, you don't want to go through all your life and reach an old age and then say, hey, I did not spend enough time with the children growing up. I did not spend enough time going out socially, meeting my friends. Or I did not spend enough time traveling and seeing the world. Or I did not spend enough time, in talking to my wife or, having good times. So work life needs a balance. And the balance is very important part of life. So one of the things that we always say is learn to let go of perfection. We want to do everything perfectly. We want to be the best chartered accountant. We want to be the best auditor. We want to be the best husband. We want to be the best father. We want to be the best son. We want to be the best in everything. Nobody is a Superman or a Superwoman or a superhuman. The idea of perfection is not real. It's just a mirage. And we keep changing, we keep driving ourselves, pushing ourselves. So it's all right to set priorities and say, hey, listen, I will prioritize this particular aspect of my client work first, then it's my children, then it's my work, or then you set priorities. It's perfectly all right to set priorities and say, it doesn't matter if my laundry is not done at home. It doesn't matter if, if everything is not perfect in my office management. It doesn't matter if my desk is totally clean. All right. But as long as I'm on top of things, I'm managing the things that are important, I'm giving importance to what really needs to be given importance to. So we need to learn to let go of perfection. If you're working in an organization, learn about company policies that will support you. If you're a lady, there are maternity benefits. There are, work from home now. There's lots of benefits that come to you. If you're a man, sometimes nowadays many companies are doing paternity leaves as well. They're allowing you to spend time more with your family. So learn about company policies, leave. I know a lot of chartered accountants, and my father was, though he was not a chartered accountant, but he was such a workaholic. And a lot of chartered accountants are workaholics. And very proud of the fact I've not taken a single day's leave in my 20 years of service in this organization. And I say, why not? Why not take leave? And now many organizations, if you look at companies like Accenture and all, at the end of the year, if you have not taken your leave, they force mandatory leave onto you. And they say, no, you have to take your leave. So in the month of December, a lot of people end up taking leave, or financial year end, a lot of people end up taking leave because otherwise it will lapse. So there is mandated leave that you must take. And so company policies are there for you to benefit from and to help you arrive at a work-life balance. I know one CEO, he joined newly as a CEO in an organization, and he found this company has a practice of everybody sits till about 9:30, 10 before they can go home. But he was not the kind who would sit late at work, and he managed his work in a way that it would be over by 5:36, and whatever the closing time was. So if the closing time was 5:30 in the organization, he would go around, he's the CEO. So he would go around and he would see those who are sitting at work. And he says, I can't leave now because there's so many people still working. How do I leave? It looks funny. Everyone's working and I'm leaving. So he had developed a very interesting strategy. He would go around to people who were sitting at work and he would ask them, Arey, what are you doing? What is this? You're making a presentation. Okay. Why couldn't you make it during the day? What happened? How did you use your 8 hours at work? So he would coach and counsel every employee who was sitting late in a way that would help that employee finish the work by 5:30 or 6 the latest and go home. He said, now go home. Your presentation is done now. You go home and go home. Your wife and children are waiting for you. So I know at least one CEO who did that. And this is now coming more and more. The work-life balance, work from home is becoming extremely stressful. Sometimes you are working in a global environment and you're at work 24/7 because somebody is waking up in America and yours, bedtime here. But now work from home, more and more HR people I talk to, they're saying we are going to now start defining working hours in a very different way than we used to define working hours before. And new solutions are coming to work from home and how you define earlier it was easy, you go to work, you switch on a button and I'm at work. When you come home, you switch on a button, I'm at home. But now that boundary is very blurred and diminished. So you're finding people are sitting on their computer terminals for many more hours than is really needed or is really healthy for you. So new policies are coming which define work timings, work hours, work commitments in different ways. And one more thing is happening is that we realize that when you're sitting from home, your work goals also will change. Because what you can accomplish working from home vis-a-vis what you can accomplish going to office is very different. So your performance goals, etc. will also. So all company policies are going to change. That will help achieve better work-life balance. Establish boundaries at work. I've seen very often one of the big problems, especially in financial companies, and I've worked very deeply with many of the big consulting firms where there is a lot of chartered accountants. I find one person is a workhorse and everybody lands up giving work to them. So this girl was there, she was doing her work and she's doing her colleague's work, and then the boss comes at 6 o'clock and says, do this also by tomorrow, and she says, okay, I will do, yes sir. So she was unable to establish boundaries, unable to say what is my work and what is someone else's work, unable to define. So I'm not saying you have to very tightly say, I'm not going to do this because it's not my work. No, but find a way to make a boundary so that you do the work that is your work, that is your role. You're able to influence others and you're able to play a role rather than do only tasks. So find ways to play a role which has boundaries, which has guidelines, which has channels, which has priorities, rather than doing a task alone. Use technology to your advantage. Today, everything is so technology enabled. Everything. And I don't need to say, starting from calendar invites, so your timing is, well managed, etc. So use as much technology. More and more is going to be available to you. Prioritize your time. Be selfish about your me time. One thing is there, we find those who are successful in life, in organizations, in life, whether as independent practitioners or as organizational managers. The ones who are successful, they give themselves me time. They will go to the gym to work out, or they'll find a time to work out for themselves, or they will make sure that on Saturdays, Sundays they take their family out, or they will make sure they love to go out for dinner, so they'll go out for dinner, or they'll make sure they like to have friends over, they'll have friends over. This is your me time where you satisfy all your needs for meeting, greeting people socially, yourself, self-care routine, and your food habits, etc. So be selfish about your me time. Seek a network of support. Everybody cannot be made happy all the time. Some amount of guilt is natural. When I'm at work, I'm guilty of not being with my family. When I'm with my family, I'm guilty about not being at work. So just imagine guilt is a natural consequence. I cannot do justice to everybody. So when I find a balance between work and life, some amount of guilt will happen because not everybody will be able to be satisfied. Okay, I have this slide and I was thinking that what do I need to teach chartered accountants about money and finance? And all chartered accountants are great at doing this. And I also realized as I'm talking to you that this 1,000 rupee note that's there in the graphic over here is now obsolete note. So I might want to change that. But yeah, so please disregard the fact that this note is obsolete. It's a graphic which has come from another presentation I made, maybe before some time. So imagine there are 2,000 rupee notes over here instead of 1,000 rupee notes. So make a budget, track expenses, take stock of what you spend, write down an honest budget, manage your finances. The reason I put this slide is that very often we are looking at other people's finances, we are helping them manage, but we don't manage our own finances well. And these are all things you will advise other people. If you're a finance manager for managing personal finances of other people, you make a budget, you tell them to make budgets, you tell them to spend money successfully, etc. Make smart investments. All these advices you know. When you spend money successfully, when you can borrow and rent, then don't buy. If you can borrow something or you can rent something, don't have to buy it. If you have the money, put it in a house that you will live in rather than pay rent. Treat your credit card like it's cash. So don't think of credit card as something, which think of it as if you're actually spending money. A lot of people think credit card is here to, I can spend more money. Spend what you have and not what you hope to make. Make smart investments, familiarize yourself with investment options. Of course, I don't need to tell this to chartered accountants. Take advantage of retirement plans. If you're going to invest in stock market, don't gamble. Every penny is hard earned. Don't gamble with money. And have a good insurance coverage. That's very important in life. And think about retirement plans. Today's youngsters don't think about what they're going to do in the future and how they're going to manage their futures. But it's time to think about good retirement plans, because everybody, you get to the age of 45, 50, and then you realize you didn't plan for your retirement, and perhaps it might be too late to start thinking then. So start putting aside something in your retirement. Life is a very lonely place. Especially working professionals, it's a very, very lonely place. And we have to create life for ourselves rather than for others. We have to do what we have to do rather than wait for others to create a life for us. So eating properly and exercising. Once you start exercising, you start becoming more positive, more optimistic. It's the ones who don't eat properly and the ones who don't exercise, they're more negative in their outlook. There's a direct correlation between what is in your gut, your bacteria in your gut, and what your mind is. There's a direct linkage between your gut bacteria and your brain waves. The neurosciences is proving that. There's substances called endorphins which exist in your gut and exist in your brain, and the two are very much linked. So if you eat well and you exercise, your gut is good, your mind will be positive as well. It's the first secret of being positive and optimistic in your outlook. Get outside. Of course, today you have to wear a mask and be socially distant. And if you're going into a closed space, wear a visor as well. Sleep 8 hours. Okay, 7 hours. Okay, 6 hours. Whatever amount of sleep you need, but don't feel at the end of the day, I didn't sleep enough. Reach out to people. Don't wait. That fellow is very egoistic. He will never call me. I'll wait for him to call me rather than call him. No, you need to take the first step. Reach out. It's your need more than anyone else's. Cut toxic people from your life. So if someone's not good for you, It's better you're without this person. Loneliness is normal. In lockdown, a lot of people were feeling so lonely, unable to cope with that loneliness. And when you're on your own, it's also a degree of freedom when you're by yourself. So solitude and freedom go hand in hand. The more people you're with, the more adjustments you have to make, and the more boundaries you have to create. At solitude, when you're in solitude, you're by yourself, you have full freedom of thought and action. And you don't need someone else to do something rewarding. You can do something rewarding for yourself. You can do it for yourself. Something that you can give yourself a pat on your back, order in a great meal, or go out somewhere, take a travel or a tour option, or so many things. People and relationships, where does emotional intelligence play? What is the role emotional intelligence plays here? Just imagine that the ability to manage stress in a relationship means being able to regulate stress and remain emotionally available. If you are stressed out and you go home after a stressful day at work, you will not be emotionally available to your children, you will not be emotionally available to your wife and your elders in your family. So if you can manage your own stress at work and your own stress in your office relationships, you will be emotionally available too. So if you develop techniques and ways of managing stress, eating right, exercising, taking deep breaths, doing a little bit of yoga, doing your pranayam, doing your meditation, the more you manage your stress means the more you are available for other people. The ability to recognize and manage emotions, the more you learn, okay, this means this kind of feeling. A lot of times I had one person in my class once, and he was says, I don't know whether I have emotions or not. I don't know whether I have feelings or not. And I sometimes get this turbulence in my heart. I don't know what it's about. So he was unable to recognize emotions. They were there. Everybody has emotions. And everyone has emotions to the same level and the same degree. But to learn to recognize it and learn to manage it. So for example, anger or irritation. Everybody gets angry. It's not just you, or it's not just me, it's a natural response. So for example, take Mahatma Gandhi. When he was in South Africa, he got thrown off the train. He was angry with the British. He says, okay, now you have to quit India. You can't continue to rule our country because this is not the way we want to be ruled. How you transform that anger, or how you deal with that anger, how you channelize that anger into positive energy is very important. So for example, I was coaching someone last week and he says, you know, those people had come to fix the air conditioner in my room and they left such a mess over there. So I got verbally very angry with them. Why they didn't clean the mess and go. So I said, what happened? No, nothing happened. The mess stayed over there. I lost my mind, I lost my temper, and I lost everything. So losing your temper means losing everything. You lose your health, lose your, how you use the energy from that. Identify what are your triggers. So in case of Gandhiji's trigger was the fact that the British were ruling the country and treating us as if we were not first-rate citizens. So when he was in South Africa, the Indians were asked to get off the train. He was not allowed to get on the train. He was thrown off the train. He was angry with that. So he says, okay, now I'm angry, so what do I do? This is my trigger. My trigger is the British rule in India. And he transformed the anger into a positive movement that brought so much of energy to so many people, and the British had no choice but to leave the country. So he recognized his emotion, he managed his emotions, and he transformed the emotions into energy. If you look, what is the word emotion? Emotion means something that puts us into motion, something that moves us, something that drives us. If we did not have emotions, we would be doing nothing. We would be just static, stationary, and because the world doesn't move on anything but emotion. The world moves only on emotion. The world does not move on logic and rationale. The world moves only on emotions. So emotions that are positive and negative emotions that can be transformed into positive actions. So the ability to recognize and manage emotions is so important because it enables you to communicate in a way that engages others. So we need to be able to access our emotions. If Shah Jahan didn't have emotions, he would not have built the Taj Mahal, which is pretty near perfect. So emotions move you to achieve, emotions move you to achieve things in ways which ability to communicate non-verbally. There is something called body language. There is something called tone of voice. There is something that communicates beyond the words that we use. And that's what governs people and relationships. People respond to the tone of your voice, not the words you say. CS need to recognize that. And I can do a full one-day program only on helping people understand what is the tone of your voice and how do you need to change and how do you change, do the right exercises, and then come out with a better tone of voice that will achieve the result you want to. Ability to use humor and play in relationships. A little bit of a joke, a little bit of humor, a little bit of a game. Ability to resolve conflict in relationships. This is a very important part of life, and it's difficult when conflict happens, extremely difficult when conflicts happen. And not many people, especially the younger generation, the Gen Z and the Alpha Gen today, are unable to resolve conflicts. It's a skill which can be learned. Just remember, these are all skills which can be learned. Nobody is born with good conflict management skills. These are always learned. So before we close for the day, there are 10 fundas of embracing the future. And I'm going to ask everyone, please put your questions into the question box, type them in there, and we will answer them at the end. 10 fundas. And the minute I see a question in the question box, I can't see a single question. When I see questions, I will start addressing those as well. Please type your questions.
Anita ma'am, there are questions in the chat box, so maybe whenever you are done, I will ask those questions and then you can answer.
Okay, because I cannot see any questions myself.
Maybe
Thank
I
you
don't
for
know,
saying that.
but I will
Thank
pick up those questions. Sure.
Okay. So very quickly, I'm going to go over 10 fundas of emotional intelligence, and then we'll close the session and we'll take all questions after that. Don't want to exceed the time. First funda of emotional intelligence is that the brain takes its shape from what the mind rests on. So if I think positive things will happen. If I think negative things will happen. And literally, the universe expands to fill that which the mind rests on. So focus on the right things. Second funda is change is inevitable and embracing change encourages development. So when I normally ask a question, who wants to change? Who wants change? Everyone wants change. But who wants to change? Nobody wants to change. All right. And nothing more than the American elections over there, which have proven that everyone wants a change. But I'm waiting to see when change actually comes, who wants to make the change happen, may or may not happen. But change is inevitable and embracing the change encourages development. So the first, okay, I don't know what the funda one is. Don't just do something, sit there. We don't have to be constantly reacting. Sometimes stop to think and reflect. Mother yourself a little bit. Be your own mother. Pamper yourself. Do what it needs to be done to take care of yourself. Third funda, there is a reptilian brain inside you. That's called the amygdala, which is somewhere over here inside you, which is the seat of all the anger and all the reactivity and all the devil and everything. It's all inside your head. And it's called the reptilian brain because it developed in mammals, it developed in the chain of evolution when the reptiles came on Earth. That's the amygdala over here. So you need to ignore sometimes what that is saying. And there are techniques and ways of doing that. And we can look at some kind of training there. Fourth funda is silence your inner know-it-all. I know all the answers. I know it and I want to say it. Keep it quiet for a bit. Fifth funda is seek out new perspectives. When you listen to others, you say, okay, aisa bhi hota hai, like something like this happens. Okay, I didn't know, something like this also happens. It's possible. Different people think differently. Funda 6 is try something new and slightly scary. Go on the edge and take a step forward and see. Because otherwise you will stay within your comfort zones and not question those comfort zones. And when you're in your comfort zones, this brain is a muscle. And when you don't exercise the muscle, it gets out of shape and it becomes a lump of fat and flesh. If anyone is trying to be very wise to you, be skeptical of very common wisdom. So you'll receive every day on the WhatsApp so much of gyan everyone gives. Try and be a little skeptical. Look at the reason why the person is saying what is being said and question everything that you accept about others. Learn to live with uncertainty. I think COVID times have taught us this more than anything ever before. That things are so uncertain, and who would have imagined this degree of uncertainty? There's a VUCA word. Funda 9 is say, oh really? Now when I was making the slide, I asked, my daughter said, what is this? What do you mean by oh really? And I say, oh really means that it could mean you're questioning somebody. It could mean that you're not taking what the other person is saying very seriously. It could mean you want to know more. It could mean so many things. So immediately after today's program, those of you who are watching from home, all right, those of you who are watching from work, the next person you meet and the next person who gives you some gyan or some funda, you just say, okay, oh really? See what answers you get. And that gives you a way to expand your mind, expand your horizon and broaden your perspective in a way things don't. And the last funda 10 is shed your old skin. So important to reinvent yourself, to get rid of the things that don't work and are serving you no purpose, relationships that are serving you no purpose, ways of responding to relationships that are not serving you a purpose, things that are sabotaging your own life that you do. Sometimes we sabotage ourselves also. Time to shed all those old things. And remember, everything happens for the greater good. This slide is very powerful. This slide is very powerful one for building your emotional intelligence, because whatever happens, even if it is COVID and COVID comes home, everything happens for the greater good. There is a larger positivity there. Even if it doesn't feel right, there's a positive intention and it's a gift from the universe. Trust the future because there's a greater good happening. Begin the day positive. In fact, I have a formula in the morning when you wake up. First of all, be grateful for everything that happened the day before that and all that you have to look forward to for the day. Say thank you to the Lord and to whoever you pray to. Say thank you for everything that I have, because there's so many who don't have enough of all this. And look at something that you learned in the last one day, in the last 24 hours. What did I learn in the last 24 hours? First thing in the morning. And the fourth thing is, today what is lying ahead of you, try to visualize that success. Concretely visualize the success. There's a 4-point program for beginning the day positive. And lastly, visualize a positive future. Because if you can't see a positive future won't happen to you. Sometimes it's about staying on top of things, not drowning under them. And when the water flows above the neck, फिर से ऊपर पानी बह रहा है. I try to take a Hindi saying and translate it into English. The water is flowing above the neck. Seek help. Talk to people like psychologists, counselors, coaches, mentors, friends, some family elder whom you trust. Seek help when the water flows above the neck. And we all get there someday or the other. We all have the times when the water is above the neck. So we'll take the questions now. We'll take questions now. So Mr. Madhav, I'm ready to take questions. Mr. Madhav, are you there?
Yeah, ma'am, I'm there. Sorry, this call came.
So now we are ready for questions. I'm through with my talk and presentation.
Okay, great.
I hope people have enjoyed.
Yeah. So I'll just start with the first question. So one of the member has asked, after seeing the number of pending work or client work, going to office without doing the exercise and also sitting late in office, how to change this attitude? So it's a generic question from all those people who are like practicing. It's like a lot of work is there, and obviously you need to pay attention to your health also. So how do we manage things together with this load, and when you know that the work is never ending? So what should be carried forward to the next day? How should we better plan the work?
So in management, we say it's about productivity. It's not about your tasks. It's about how productive you are. And the word productivity means different from work. It has a different meaning. So I have work to do, yes, but how productive am I? It holds the key. And there's a direct correlation between amount of time taken for self-care in eating right and exercising well and being positive and meditating for a few minutes every day and your productivity. There's a direct correlation. So the more time you give yourself, the more productivity you have, the less that pile of tasks becomes at the end of the day. And there is a faith and there is data, there's research, there is experience. You know, I make sure I exercise 1 hour a day. There is experience. You ask people who exercise and see how productive they are. See, the most productive people, they make sure that they exercise. They make sure they make time for themselves. So the more the self-care, the more the productivity. Of course, there's a balance there. So 15 minutes time invested in self gives you 15% more productivity. That is my experience and that is my faith. And it's not about doing tasks, it's about being more productive.
Okay. And I think deciding priorities also makes a lot of difference, I believe, because we always hear that when we make our to-dos and decide priorities. So obviously that check should be there that this is the first priority item, this is the second priority item, until unless, because if you take lesser priority items first, you end up consuming a lot of time there, and then you end up wasting time, and then you carry forward the whole bulk to the next day. So I think that's also an essence. I mean, what I get from you.
Definitely, no one is perfectionist. You can't do it all. So in that big pile of tasks, you know, just organizing yourself, making a list of things to do. There's things that are, you make a, you know, when you make a list of things to do, sometimes we do it, you know, we just write down item number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are all the tasks I have to do. So instead, I always advise people, you divide your page into 4 sections like this, and you say that I need to have things that are urgent, highly urgent and not so urgent, things that are important, you know, highly important, not so important. And now you start writing all the tasks that you have to do in these 4 quadrants.
Perfect.
And when you write the tasks in these 4 quadrants, it becomes very apparent things that are urgent and important will get the first priority. A very simple way to write your things to do list. Everyone has a things to do list. I have a things to do list. Everyone writes it down. So you write down a list of things to do. Don't make it a long list. Put it into 4 squares. Urgent and important, only important, not urgent, not important.
Right.
Your priorities get set immediately. Simple tools like this.
Okay, great.
Yes.
The second question is, how do you have work-life balance when working from home? So, especially, I mean, if I talk about people, obviously from corporates, like I am right now there in one of the MNCs. So, we know that a lot of we are working from home. People, the bosses know that, okay, you're working from home, you are having a laptop, you are always accessible. Obviously, when you are home, the expectations of the family members are also that you're working from home, have some share of work to be done. So how do we manage that kind of work-life balance when you're actually working from home and with the family?
Yeah.
Any tips?
When you're working from home, it becomes like a seamless, working only. And when work starts and when work stops and personal life starts, there's no boundaries. Now, most
Correct.
of the HR managers whom I have met, they have recognized this and they're in the process of framing policies. As I mentioned earlier, they're framing policies in building certain boundaries to allowing people some work-life balance. Most HR managers I have met. And for some people, it's a blessing in disguise. I know, for example, I have a son, he lives in Auckland and he's had a small baby who's 3 months old, 4 months old. So for him, working from home seems to work better because he's able to juggle things better for now.
Correct.
But after a while, it will become difficult to define those boundaries also. So work from home calls for certain multitasking, juggling skills. And if both husband and wife are both working from home, then you have to match your day schedule so that one takes care of the baby and the other is working from home, or you have to find some elder in the family to take care of the baby when the others are working. So there is no fixed formula, and a lot of HR managers are trying to create policies that are going to enable work-life balance when working from home. They're going to start defining hours of work and hours of meetings and hours of doing tasks, because everybody, the meeting becomes more priority and the task becomes less priority, whereas the tasks are as important as the meeting.
Correct.
Sometimes the meetings are more of a waste of time and they're taking away time from your task. So there are solutions that are being thought of and can be thought of also. And at times you don't have to attend all the Zoom call and the Zoom meetings. You can attend some of them and give time to the rest of your life as well.
Yes,
And,
yes.
And one more thing that HR managers are doing now, they know that if people are going to work from home, there is more potential to look at a lesser workload and spread that out over 2 people. So the same job can be spread out over 2 people sometimes, or there's, 3 people can do 2 people's jobs, and we adjust the wages and the salaries and the compensation accordingly, so that people are not as loaded as they would be, when they're working from home. So that's
Correct.
another thought that is happening in HR circles. How do we, give people lesser chunks of work, and so that those chunks can at least get done? Because when we give people the same amount of work, half of it is falling flat because it's not able to be accomplished.
Correct.
So
Correct.
more realistically setting workloads and work targets.
Understood. Okay, so we take the next question. So there's a question how we can treat an employee who is always making mistakes. So yes, in this profession we play with numbers. The chance of errors should not be there, or the errors may cause like huge amount of issues or problems for us. So obviously, if a person is there who is actually continuously making mistakes either with numbers or anything, so how do we look at that, and how do we deal with this situation?
Okay. So this is an example I take very often, that someone has submitted an assignment to me and is full of errors. So what do I say? Now there are 2 ways of responding to this broadly. One is I can say, oh my God, this person has made so many errors, let me do it myself and blah, blah, blah. And I fire the person. I say, look at you, you're always constantly making mistakes. You don't improve and you don't do anything. And so when I do this, what I'm doing is I am criticizing a person. So when I criticize a person, what happens is I diminish his self-esteem. He feels that, okay, you know, my boss is anyway going to do it all, so I might as well keep giving him this work. He's going to yell anyway, so I might as well give him the same quality of work. Or his boss is going to feel, or the subordinate's going to feel, oh my goodness, you know, I'm not good enough and I don't deserve anything good in life. So the self-esteem is suffered. And we call this criticizing. However, when we give constructive feedback, is a different way of saying the same thing. We focus on the issue, not the person. And I'd look at him and say, listen, you know, Mr. So-and-so, there is 25 mistakes on this page. Not 24, not 26, exactly 25. And I point them out. Now he cannot argue back because it's a fact. And it's not impacting his personal life. I'm not saying you are lousy or I'm not talking to him as a human being. I'm just looking at the issue. I'm not looking at the person. When I say there are 25 mistakes on one page, all right, okay, there are 25 mistakes. Yes, I know there are 25 mistakes. Once you have got an acknowledgement, yes, there are 25 mistakes, you need to get into what we call a problem solving mode. Okay, why did these mistakes happen? When I'm solving a problem, I'm asking, why did these mistakes happen? The person said, you know, I had 25 phone calls in between and I was busy attending those phone calls, and therefore I could not. Every time I got back to the computer, it made a mistake. Okay. So, or the person could say, you know, that, you know, when you were giving me a dictation and you're giving me instruction, I couldn't hear you clearly. So now you have to tell me much more clearly. Or the person could say, you know, my finger is a little broken, it's hurting. So when I type on the computer, it's paining very much. Or when you ask the question, why, you look at problems and we get to the cause of the problem. Very often we don't get to the cause of the problem. We just said the subordinate's making mistakes and will continue to make mistakes. But we don't get to the cause of the problem. Cause could be, okay, I didn't do the spell check, or I didn't do the totals, or I didn't check the columns, or I didn't do the checklist properly. Get to the cause of the problem. Unless you identify the cause of the problem, it's not going to go away. You're still going to get those 25 mistakes every time.
Right.
Once you get to the cause of the problem, then you need to discuss a solution with this person. What is the solution? Right. Okay, henceforth, run a spell check every time you make an assignment. Or henceforth, you must take this total, write it down here in rough and make the totals vertically and horizontally, write it down in rough. If they don't tally, then something is wrong. Build in a system of checks and balances.
Yeah.
So when you are able to find a solution, then you have to go all out and chase the solution. Then you have to hold him accountable. If he still gives the mistake, then he's making excuses and he continues to make the mistake, then training is important. That's how we train people. We find solutions and we empower them to solve those problems and implement those solutions. And then over a period of time, we get less mistakes.
Correct. Correct. So I take away this point very well. So if I just put it the other way, you need to be granular when you are trying to explain him what he has done wrong. At the same time, being empathetic with him that, okay, he does not feel that kind of resistance mode. He don't go into that kind of mode, and at least he will be very conscious from the next time onwards, okay, that this is the mistakes which I'm committing, and it's not something on a 30,000 feet level. I'm just communicating, okay, so this is completely wrong. Instead of that, I'm giving him the areas where he needs to improve, so that it will at least give him that sense that what he needs to take care next time onwards. So I think that's
empower him to give a solution to the problem. What is the solution according to you?
Perfect.
Okay, what is the solution that will work for you, rather than I give him a solution? What is the solution that will work for you? And then after that, you have to hold him accountable.
Right. Right. Definitely. Definitely. Okay. So we move on to the next question. So the next question is, how do we, what is the way out to keep overperformers with the firm? So it's a very valid question. So when people are performing very well or they're high performers, obviously the pay packages and the iterations, and how do we manage everything so that the person who is actually performing stays within the firm itself with the same name instead of not moving. So how do we ensure that? Any couple of things which you would like to highlight?
So those who are top performers, the mavericks, the ones who are innovating, they're actually rewriting your standards, they're rewriting your textbooks, they're rewriting the processes, you know, because they're so maverick characters, they're high performers, exceptionally high performers. You have to recognize the psyche of a high performer. It's different from the psyche of an average performer. The psyche of a high performer craves recognition because he's not part of the team. He's not run of the mill, you know. He's not like a team player. He's an outstanding person. He stands on the periphery of the group work and the teamwork. So he craves recognition because he doesn't get it from his peers. So he craves recognition, number one. Second of all, he craves independence because he's capable of doing it on his own. He just needs a pair of wings and he'll fly.
Yes.
Thirdly, he needs some one or two critical relationships, which are mostly mentoring type, that will keep him anchored in the organization. So some guru, you know, some great guru that I have to work with. I have to work with this particular person and he's my guru. Every maverick performer has some guru or some idol whom he idol worships. And keep that as the link to keep him. So you will have maybe in an organization of 100 people, you'll have 5 such high performers. As an HR professional or as a person who's managing that business, you will need to retain these 5 high performers. So one, give them a lot of recognition. 2, they work best with bonuses, not with increments. So a performance bonus, a performance linked bonus. And third, give them 1 or 2 relationships in the organization, foster those relationships that will anchor their membership. This is a very quick solution that I'm giving you, but we have worked on this very deeply with many clients and we know what works and how the psyche of these people work. You have to work with each one of them. Each one is a different case study and you have to find a solution for each one of those high performers. But these are some broad principles.
Okay.
So don't treat them the same as you treat other people. The same policies don't apply.
Correct, absolutely. So I think with this, we end our questions and I think we are on time. Now I think we can wrap up this session. Anita ma'am, thank you so much on behalf of WARC. It was really nice interacting with you. And we actually didn't realize that these are the softer aspects of the whole thing, I mean, the whole profession. And these are like really important things to be taken care. I mean, from starting how the transition to technology is taking place, and at the same time how to be emotionally quotient, how do we maintain that. At the same time, we are also equally planning our finances and work, and how do we rate the performers, how do we take care of the underperformers. So it's really the softer aspects which we generally don't realize in our day-to-day mundane work. So it's really helpful, and these insights really we will carry to our offices, and I think it's something which is great. And thank you so much, ma'am, for giving a glimpses of this. And I think every topic is a bigger topic in itself. Thank you so much, and we'd like to interact with you again on this forum. Thank you so much on behalf of the
Thank you so much. Thank you to all the participants.
Yes, thank you.
I'm just showing one slide which is giving our contact details in case anybody wishes to see. I don't know if you can still see the slides. In case anybody wishes to contact us, you can feel free to contact us.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Good night.